Hey guys.
Hey guys. So would you like to start with the American dream? And do you have any opinions on it? What's your
Um,
experience with it?
well, it's so weird because I'm an Iranian American Muslim, and I have a master's degree in African American studies like most Iranians, and I think like I spent a fair amount of time being like, pretty confused, just about identity, because I didn't have like a larger minority group. Like when we moved to Palm Springs, California, when I was like 7 years old, and we doubled the Muslim population of the town. And so, so my first like American dream was to be. We had a lot of Mexicans in Palm Springs, like a very like 40-50% of my high school was Mexican. I like longed to be Mexican. And that was like my first, talking about American dreams. I was like, it'd be great to be Mexican. I mean, this was like before Trump, Instagrammed a tostada, but like, but I just felt like, oh, there's like community and identity, and they have restaurants and radio stations and Cesar Chavez or whatever, and I'll just say it, Taco Bell. And so, I thought that was like, cool. And then of course, there were no Mexicans when I went to college, so that's when I started to want to be black. And so I think for me, the American dream has always been to be a part of like an easily recognizable minority group. Of course, after 9/11, I guess like terrorism was my minority group, so I got it finally. Which was fun. What about you?
Yeah, I have somewhat of a different story. Yeah, there weren't. I mean, I don't think I ever wanted to be Mexican, but
You should try it.
I mean, I'm still young. But I mean, growing up, for me, I grew up middle class, and I grew up in the suburbs of DC. My whole family's from DC. They have vastly different accents than, like my mom, dad, aunts and uncles, grandparents. They have vastly different accents than like me, my brother, my sister, my cousins and stuff. I grew up pretty sure that I was rich as hell. And I was like busing in with white kids to like black public schools and stuff. And I was, my high school had like, I think it was like 65% black. And I was like, would be the only black kid in my class. And we were cloistered off and stuff like that. It was all very, very safe and stuff. And very diverse. And, it took me a while, I think, until after college and just talking to my parents and stuff like that relatively recently to realize that it wasn't la-di-da, and like it, what I thought was the American dream, like the effort that it took to create that, I guess, mirage for me and my siblings that my parents created. Like I used to, hear about my grandmother when she used to work for the post office in DC, and for 20 years she was training white people, how to, basically manage her and how to be her supervisor and stuff like that. And then my dad's first job, I think it was McDonald's, but I think he's lying too about that. Everyone says that. But like his first, I guess, grown man job was like driving a bus in the DC Metro Transit system, and he like went all the way up until he was like a middle management or whatever. But that was his only job for 40 years, and like his whole thing was he was also training like young white whippersnappers how to be his boss and stuff like that, and just like he was always like tired, and like mean and grumpy and stuff, and until he retired, and then he became like this weirdly relaxed, weirdly chill guy. And I always ask him if he like smokes weed. He's always lies and says he doesn't. And and for me, it was like between that and my grandmother, and then my mom's I saw my mom's body like deteriorate based on like she wore heels to work for 40 years, and like her ankles went, her back went, she had to get back surgery and stuff. And I saw like the toll that it took to create this mirage of you are the Huxtables or whatever, you know? And then more recently to see it, how easily it's taken away, like with, you know, with like Tamir Rice or Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown or someone like that, and just specifically, you know, black men, but, you know, Rakia Boyd too, you know, and how fast it was and how little of it mattered. It kind of made me really bitter to the whole idea of it, you know, and started questioning like how much of it was actually real. And I think I've gotten to the point where it's like none of it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what's interesting about, I think, even if you do achieve some kind of American dream, it's there's always like an undergirding of, you know, there's some things that are awful. And I think one moment, I remember when I was 11 years old and my parents managed to buy a house. And this is when I was like, oh, I think they're like earning money now, you know, because they hadn't, you know, they came with nothing, the whole thing. They came with nothing, and then they started getting things. We went to Paris for the summer. For like a summer trip, and I was like, I'm so cool, I'm so amazing, like I'm going to Paris. But the thing that we were doing in Paris was rescuing my aunt from a refugee camp, and so it wasn't like it was like yeah, you're going to Paris, but like, you know, this is awful, and so it was sort of like the American dream of like I can afford international travel, and yet you know. Seeing, you know, your family go through the process of political asylum and political and refugee status and that whole thing, and like how, and like living in violent, you know, and it's funny because we would stay in these like violent suburbs of Paris or whatever, and that, you know, that's just kind of like these juxtapositions where you're like achieving a thing but still dealing with this other thing all the time.
So you got back from Paris, and then Donald Trump was elected president, and like, so what was like the next, I guess, morning for you? Did you feel, was there a change or a sea change in your life? In anything?
The morning after the apocalyptic political situation.
That one, yeah.
I mean, I cried. I mean, it was like a big grief feeling, and I think, you know, we were talking about this in the green room, is like when you do a lot of this kind of work where you're like fighting bigotry, it's already like it can be a drag, you know? And then this election felt like we were sort of like running a marathon, and then we came to the end of the marathon, and then we realized we had to run 4 more marathons immediately. And so that was the feeling. It just, you know, and it just felt like I'm pre-exhausted for whatever work we have to do in the next 4 years, because I'm already generally tired from the drag that is fighting against bigotry. And so I feel like that was a real exhausting kind of grief that took me over. And the question that I've been getting a lot, like, so I'm a comedian and I performed like a few days after the election in Birmingham, Alabama. I also performed in Atlanta, and I also performed in Puebla, Mexico, to 4,000 Mexicans who came up to me like individually to say we're not paying for a wall. And I was like, I know. And so I had these like interesting experiences around the country and around the world, and people everywhere I go, people of color ask me, what do you say when someone says hateful things to you, or when someone makes like a racist joke or something in front of you? And that's a question that I feel like is now, I keep getting it so much more from Twitter and Facebook, and from, you know, and from shows and stuff like that. And so that's something that has been on my mind recently. And the thing that I do is generally like if someone says something really heinous to me, I usually am like, that's a really lovely shirt. And like I compliment, I completely just try and flip the script, because I don't want to escalate. And I think ultimately we're able to have a conversation with people. And I get a lot of pushback because people make it sound like that I'm like, you gotta be a model minority and like you gotta take the responsibility of being really great all the time. And I find that it's not so much like a responsibility, but it just makes my life a little bit more fun not to escalate these situations and to think of like fun and ridiculous ways through them. And so that I think is something that's come up so much in the last few weeks. Yep. Have you felt like the question of like how am I gonna be with this stuff so prevalent, with the racism so top of
I mean, I think we're gonna die soon, all of us. But there's like a, I mean, I'm dead serious, but there's like a dread beneath that and I guess like personal confidence in my physical safety that. I've written about police brutality and in all its forms a lot and stuff, but I always felt almost as if I were studying it. Like I steer clear of cops. I basically move through places with a bunch of other coastal kids who aren't from here and stuff like that. I mean, I worked at Gawker. And it was all, it was mostly, nice, polite, vulgar white kids and stuff. And, I'm small, I can't fight, but I'm black. And generally that's enough, like to stave off most things in my peer groups and everything. And I never felt immediate danger. And it came from the fact that, like, it's not just cops anymore, right? Like in the way that how quickly hate crimes and stuff spiked, like literally overnight. I mean, it was like midnight on election night, and then it was like someone fired off a gun. It was like go, like no one, warmed up into like drawing swastikas.
Right,
Everyone's like immediately
yeah.
drawing like really great perfect swastikas and stuff.
Yeah.
Like how like I mean I guess it's not the hardest thing to do, but I still feel it, but it's like this this pressure on me that I'm not as confident of my physical safety when I'm walking, home alone in Brooklyn,
yeah.
or if I'm walking to work or something like that. And I didn't realize how safe I felt and how unsafe I could feel until it felt like someone switched the light off the next day. Because it's not just I'm in my little nice liberal pocket here in the beautiful green space or something like that. It's the fact that the individuals are emboldened and feel like they have, I guess, the right to physically harm you, and just by the election alone, they have it's validation, and everything that they kept inside can now be unleashed physically. It's terrifying, and then then you have like global warming, so which is it's like even if I'm cool, it's over.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Well, I'll just to wrap up, I'll share a quick little tale because I have a weird I'm not a black man, so I don't have to I don't attract the same kind of physical thing that you might or whatever. But also I have like a very loose relationship with fear, which is and just a quick example is I was on tour with a bunch of Muslim American comedians. We were in Decatur, Tennessee. There was a state fair. It's a very depressed town economically, and we're at the state fair, and I see a bare knuckle boxing match kind of set back in the woods the way bare knuckle boxing matches are. And And I walked in there and I was like, oh my God, we should offer some free comedy between matches. And I walked up to, and I thought that it was a brilliant idea, and I walked up to the ticket seller and I was like, hello, we are a jolly band of Muslims and we would like to provide you with free comedy. And the guy was like, I'm gonna ask my boss, right? And so then he goes to ask his boss, and I'm standing there, and everyone's like totally panicked that I've asked this question. Everyone thinks it's nuts, and I was like, guys, it's fine. And then I looked around, and I like noticed a couple snarling dogs, and then I noticed a couple of dudes with like blood dripping from their hands, and then it clued in like, oh, like bare knuckle boxing matches attract people who are especially fond of violence, right? and there was like beer cans and whatever, just the kind of scene that you're suddenly like, I made a mistake, right? And then the guy, the boss comes out, and he's not wearing a shirt, though to honor the moment he was wearing a bow tie, and he comes out and he grabs a stick that was lying against the wall the way sticks do, and he grabs the stick and he says, y'all Muslims better get out of here. And then we all start running, and I immediately urinated all over myself running down this hill, and I just thought like that was not the right setting for my desire to build a bridge with mainstream America. So we should probably both be a little bit more on our toes.
Thank you both.